Hi everyone, welcome back to this YouTube channel. If you're new to this channel, I'm Dr. Ramani, and I talk about narcissism daily on this channel. So please consider subscribing to this channel so you don't miss any videos. This community has been growing steadily, and what's been more remarkable is hearing back from this community on not only that people are learning about these toxic patterns, but they're making very real changes in their lives as a result. And because more of you are becoming interested in healing, you're like, all right, lady, I know enough about narcissism. Please stay tuned. We're going to, give much more specific details soon. But if you want to receive more information about this healing program that's going to launch in January, click the link in the description below and you'll get more information. It's no obligation. It's just going to give you information. And if you're watching this video down the line, by then a link to register will also be available in the video description below. So let's talk about this idea of a midlife crisis in a narcissistic person. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Have any of you watched a narcissistic person go through a midlife crisis? Drop it in the comments, maybe even what you saw. Now, it can be difficult to tell where the midlife crisis begins and the adolescent behavior that characterizes a narcissistic person's entire life to that point ends. I can promise you this, when a narcissistic person has a midlife crisis, it ain't pretty. Now, the concept of a midlife crisis is a sort of existential crisis, a looking back at life and taking stock, a sort of last fight against the inevitability of aging, of a body that's starting to creak a bit more, stuff and bits that sag more, and an invisibility that descends upon us while watching a younger generation get the validation that the midlife person seemingly had so recently. Now, when a healthy, psychologically healthy person that goes into midlife, there's often some grace. And when in a healthy person, what we might see is this is a time of purpose, of creating more balance between relationships, work, family, and a sense of feeling a commitment to make the world better through mentorship and giving back. And in essence, sort of trying to leave a legacy. For a narcissistic person, midlife is the seventh circle of hell. It's a time when the narcissistic person is feeling the loss of grandiosity that accompanies age. The idea that their body's a narcissistic person's going to age, it blows up the fantasy of forever being young. So narcissistic people push back on age, whether it's cosmetic procedures or long hours in the gym to maintain a physique or taking up all kinds of youthful and interesting hobbies or pursuits or adventures or travels or getting the stereotype sports car or a new hairstyle, or even just flipping the script on their lives and perhaps ending long-term relationships. Now, not all of these things are bad, but in a narcissistic person's hands, it's not really about fun or rediscovery or staying healthy. It's really about an attempt to disavow aging and have contempt for it. Because aging means a loss of validation. Now there's people who are younger, or more attractive, or more sparkling, and all of us realize this and recognize this as we age. But for someone who's narcissistic, this revelation is catastrophic. For anyone to slowly become invisible doesn't feel good. For a narcissist, it's an eradication of their sense of self, and that recognition can bring up rage, frustration, and a deep existential anger. But it's more than the superficial scripts of a midlife crisis. There are things that are during midlife that are particularly difficult for someone who's narcissistic. For them, midlife may mean a loss of power, shifts in their career, an awareness of their own mortality. And it's at that point that grandiosity keeps getting punctured. It's a reminder, nope, you are not superhuman and you're not going to live forever. And all of those other defenses, the entitlement, the validation seeking, those all start showing their cracks. And that leaves a narcissistic person even more fragile and then more angry. Now, I'm convinced that that trope of the midlife crisis of the person who tries to look younger and drives a sports car and probably has an inappropriately young partner is a sketch of a narcissistic person navigating midlife. Multiple panics set in for them, the sense that the window is closing in on trading in on youth and beauty and the razzle-dazzle. And unless the person has already really made it big in midlife and has lots of money and power, then the recognition also is that the time to do that is narrowing. Opportunity seems to start getting really narrow. Now, midlife brings out a rage in many narcissistic people, whether it's that punctured grandiosity or the superficial fading or the diminished success that they have when they try to seek validation. And all of this brings out their shame, and then boom, Then comes the rage. The shame can be managed in some ways by pumping up their grandiosity and pretending they aren't aging by trying to hide it. Now, one thing we see is that while a wealthy narcissistic person may be able to hold their power in midlife by maintaining transactional relationships or using their money to wield power, for most other people in most industries, there can be a loss of power and a sort of sidelining of people as they become older. It depends on the industry, but that sense of being put out to pasture. And because many narcissistic people love to get validation and wield power at work, it means that it is another slap in the midlife face and again can bring up that shame, rage, and frustration in people who are narcissistic. The invisibility that comes with older age is also an issue. Because of gendered biases and oppressions around aging, it's a process that is judged more harshly in women. For many narcissistic women, the idea that they can no longer stop traffic with their looks can result in utter devastation. To not be seen by others is the ultimate loss of supply, and despite the highest levels of self-care, people are going to say to them, "Wow, you look great for your age," rather than that breathless attention that they may have received when they were younger. This can result in rather desperate attempts to stay young in order to continue to get supply and validation, but in parallel to that, as it feels like it's slipping away, depression, anger, a sense of betrayal by the world, and a sense of regret at youth lost. Now, in narcissistic men, the invisibility is also there, and it may be manifested as issues with sexual arousal and perhaps the need for a pharmacological intervention, lower energy than before, and this may matter if a person now has a partner that's much younger than them. And while some may have the power or the money that allows them to get what they want in midlife, there's always that anxious monitoring of the rear view mirror for the approaching onslaught of younger, more nimble people, and again, that regret about youth lost. Remember, in the myth, Narcissus was a young, attractive guy. Now, narcissistic people do not age gracefully. Getting older is the ultimate reality check. As I said, saggy parts, creaky joints, more cluttered and less cooperative memories. And even when a person feels young inside, as mentally sharp and driven as ever, our bodies do not want to cooperate. It is what it is. The idea of aging authentically and not resisting your body is a memo that narcissistic folks definitely didn't get. Some of you who are married to narcissistic people may note that midlife may have initiated a period of infidelity and betrayal or made existing infidelity worse, or spending habits may have shifted to be more frivolous and youth-oriented. Whether they fall into these familiar patterns or you are simply enduring the increasing irritability of a narcissistic person who is beginning to recognize their shelf life, it can take the aggravation of being in a narcissistic relationship and make it far worse. Now listen, aging is funny. I'm very midlife, and I am not a fan of how much I creak when I get out of bed in the morning. But I got to tell you, the accumulation of life lessons does feel good. In healthy people, there's a recognition that age brings more wisdom, more awareness, more patience, more willingness to be flexible, and you're a little better able to not sweat the small stuff. But unfortunately, this process doesn't happen for narcissistic people who really ruminate and resent the reminder of their old age and their mortality. Well, if you did like this video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. Would love to hear about your midlife experiences with narcissistic folks. And if you have been in a long-term relationship, be prepared that whatever you're experiencing may get worse. And any of you who had narcissistic parents may very well have remembered them turning into midlife and getting even more grumpy and more irritable and more rageful than before. So that's their midlife experience, but a reminder that it may make our narcissistic relationships even more uncomfortable than they were before. Thanks again.